Before we get started, like we do every week, we're going to go over the weekly top 25. As you all know, we've been going over the AP top 25, but since the college football rankings came out for the first time last week, we are now using those, since obviously those are the only ones that matter when it comes to deciding which four teams will make the playoff. Not a whole lot of changes from last week. Georgia is still a solid number one. In fact, they're still a unanimous number one in the AP top 25. Alabama is still number two. Oregon has moved up to number three. Michigan State's loss allowed that to happen. Ohio State has moved up to number four. So right now, if the playoffs started this weekend, it would be Georgia against Ohio State and Alabama against Oregon. Cincinnati moved up to number five. Michigan moved up to number six. Michigan State dropped to seven. Oklahoma at 9-0 is sitting at number 8. Notre Dame is number 9, and Oklahoma State is number 10. Of course, it's filled out after that by Texas A&M, Wake Forest, Baylor, Brigham Young, Ole Miss, North Carolina State, Auburn, Wisconsin, Purdue, Iowa, Pittsburgh, San Diego State, University of Texas, San Antonio, Utah, and Arkansas. So I'm going to start by one bit of kind of a confusing result is the committee has said many times that they value head-to-head, and they dropped Michigan State one behind Michigan when Michigan State, in fact, beat Michigan. So I guess I'll throw that out first. Joseph, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't. Have they come out and said they value head-to-head, or that's just kind of implied?
No, they've said that. You know, every time they do the show where they reveal the new rankings, they always have a little back and forth with the committee chairman. And they've said a number of times in the past that they do value head-to-head.
They value it or not, which apparently they do. I think, yeah, if Michigan State beat Michigan, which they did,
right,
they should clearly be ranked ahead of them, because if you're deciding on which team is better, well, it was proven on the field, right? So
yeah,
that makes the most sense to me in all factors, not just the playoff committee. So whether Michigan's actually better than Michigan State, we don't know. All you can go off of is when they play.
Correct. And I also think part of the reason they did that is because they have a lot of room to correct it, meaning that Michigan State still has to play Ohio State. Michigan has to play Ohio State. So if Michigan State ends up beating Ohio State and Michigan loses to Ohio State, obviously Michigan State will benefit from that. So I don't think it matters a whole lot at the moment.
That's
Nathan,
another thing that go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joseph. Go ahead.
Another thing I think is happening is, like you said, the committee knows the upcoming schedule. So I think it's a little bit factored in week to week is, okay, let's rank them like this, and then it'll get sorted out, next week or the week after, as opposed to just, okay, let's rank the best teams how we feel right this second,
Right. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this, of course, Michigan defeated Indiana 29-7 last Saturday. Indiana's not ranked, but they're considered one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Michigan State lost on the road to Purdue, and Purdue is unranked as well. Purdue also beat Iowa back when Iowa was ranked number 2. So that could have had something to do with it, maybe. But I still think that, as you said, it'll work itself out down the road with all these teams kind of playing each other.
Playing head-to-head should trump all that stuff, because usually you look at strength of schedule to determine, well, which one of these teams should win if they played each other.
Right.
Who's better? Well, if they played each other, they answer that for you.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if the team that lost that game is actually better. They just happen to lose the game. They lost. So that's that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to – like, the Patriots are probably better than the Giants in 07, but the Giants beat them in the Super Bowl.
Right.
You're not going to give them the Super Bowl trophy because they lost. So
right.
When I look at the rankings, this is my same problem with the AP rankings. Same problem with that as I have with the college football playoff rankings. If you look at the top 25, it looks like a hodgepodge of methodologies that they use to rank this. There's different methods you can use, right? You can go, okay, you can say we're strictly looking at record, no matter, or just say Power 5. We're looking at Power 5 records.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we're looking at head-to-head matches. There's different ways, or you could have the method of we're not looking at record and we're not looking at head-to-head. We're going to say who do we think is just the best team, regardless.
Right.
Who do we think has the best chance of being competitive in the playoff?
Right.
There's different methods you can use.
Right.
But if you look at this, if you try to review this or go through to analyze this with each method, it doesn't seem to fall into either one of those categories. It's like it's like a hodgepodge of methods they use to put this together.
Right.
Michigan's ahead of Michigan State. Well, they have the same record and Michigan State beat them. But they may say, well, we just feel like Michigan's a better football team. Okay, that's okay. If that's the case, then you can find other. If that's the case, then how come some of these other things are the way they are? Like, I'm trying to think of an example here. Like, okay, yeah. If that's the case, then are you telling me that you think Michigan is actually not as good as Cincinnati? Then because Cincinnati's ahead of Michigan. They're the better football. That tells you, okay, well, they're probably looking at record then, because Cincinnati's undefeated, Michigan isn't.
Right.
But if you look at that, then why is Oklahoma number 8? They're undefeated.
Right.
So it's like you can't really.
No.
They're using a hodgepodge of methods. It's on a team-by-team basis, which you can't do.
I think that there needs to be a few hardline factors. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so because obviously the committee is a group of people in a room, right?
Right.
But if a team has beaten another team, there's no discussion. They're ahead. If there's a question, right?
Right.
If a team has a better record than another team, no question, they're ahead. You just use the committee to discussion for teams that have the same record and haven't played each other, right?
Right.
And I say when it comes to Power 5, because Cincinnati is different because they're undefeated, but they're not in Power 5.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Power 5 teams, I think rule number 1 should be record is over everything.
Right.
Because I know schedules are different, but if you're in the Power 5, you're all going to have pretty competitive schedules.
Right.
So if you're undefeated, that trumps everything. That should be number 1. And that would put Oklahoma much higher, but Oklahoma's 8th somehow. And what's more mind-boggling is they stayed the same. They didn't move at all in the rankings. They dropped Michigan State ahead of Oklahoma after they lost.
Right.
And they lost to who beat them?
Purdue beat Michigan
Purdue,
State.
who wasn't ranked ahead of Michigan State.
No.
Like, it's just very strange. And Oklahoma's a Power 5 team. So they really dislike Oklahoma, obviously.
Well, they do.
Right.
Oklahoma plays in a weaker conference, and they struggled with most of their opponents. But another thing, I mentioned earlier, I kind of misspoke saying Michigan lost to Indiana, which was considered a good team. Indiana's 2-7, and they haven't even won a game in the Big Ten. Purdue is 6-3 and is 4-2 in the Western Conference of the Western Division. So actually, Michigan State lost to a better football team than Michigan lost to or beat, and they fell behind Michigan. So,
and I'm assuming Notre Dame lost. I'm assuming it's Notre Dame has the same record as them, and they lost to a team that was ranked higher in Cincinnati.
Correct.
But I guess people consider them not to be as good of a team, though they are ranked higher.
I guess
than
so.
Purdue and Indiana.
I guess so. But the interesting thing,
and I guess the rest of Notre Dame's schedule is not quite as good as the Big Ten schedule. I guess.
Well,
because otherwise, why are they?
You can say that, but I think Notre Dame's schedule is as good as Michigan and Michigan State's.
Yeah, so that's why I'm confused as to why they're below both those teams because they beat Purdue,
right?
They beat Wisconsin, who at the time was 18th,
right?
I don't know.
Wisconsin's 18 now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what we're going to find out is it's going to be interesting because I looked at the Big Ten standings, and right now, if you look at, let me go back to it and look at the Big Ten. All right, in the Eastern Division of the Big Ten, Ohio State is 6-0 in conference. Michigan State's 5-1. Michigan's 5-1. Now, those 3 teams are all going to play each other, and they still got to play Penn State, a couple of them, who is 3-3 in the conference. Penn State's not a factor for winning the Eastern Division, but they could be a factor as to who does win the Eastern Division. So Ohio State could win it by beating Michigan State, Michigan, and then that makes it pretty cut and dry. But if one of them beats them, we could have an interesting factor. Now let's look at the Western Division. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Purdue, and Iowa are all 4-2. So it's going to be interesting if a Purdue comes out of the West and beats one of these teams. Let's say Ohio State, they have to play Purdue, obviously, but let's say Purdue beats a Michigan or a Michigan State again. That's going to knock the Big Ten's strength of schedule or credibility down some. So I think the committee's sitting there kind of with the catbird seat. They know they're taking flack. They know they're going to hear it, but they figure, hey, this is all going to work itself out. Okay. The only thing that's not going to work itself out for them is the Cincinnati factor. And that's something that I think they're hoping Cincinnati will lose to SMU, because really, if you look at Cincinnati's schedule, they've got 2 games left, SMU this Saturday and at Eastern Carolina. They're not going to lose to East Carolina, I wouldn't think. But obviously, I take that back. They play South Florida this week, and then they play SMU. So the Cincinnati factor could throw some wrench into the committee's thoughts, because right now you've got Cincinnati sitting at number 5. So let's say, for example, Georgia goes undefeated, Alabama goes undefeated the rest of the way, plays Georgia in the SEC championship. Oregon goes undefeated, wins the Pac-12 championship. Ohio State wins the Big Ten. Now you're going to have the Georgia-Alabama loser. If Georgia loses, are they going to drop them below Cincinnati? Probably not. If Alabama loses, they are. So I think there's a lot of things there that'll play itself out.
I don't like that.
What
like Joseph brought this up too. Like I hope this is not what the committee's doing. Oh well, it's all going to play itself out. We'll just do whatever. That's no excuse to not rank it the best you can at the moment.
I agree.
And their rankings make no sense. Let me bring this one ranking up too, all right, which I just saw. Explain this to me, please. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but University of Texas San Antonio is 9-0 undefeated.
Right.
They are 23rd. They were not ranked before this week.
And right.
How come they are 23rd at 9-0 when Cincinnati is 9-0 at number 5? Now, what's Cincinnati's big game they'd be?
Notre Dame.
Well, University of Tennessee San Antonio beat Illinois.
Right.
And who did Illinois just beat?
Yeah.
Penn State.
Yeah.
So Illinois is obviously pretty good.
Right.
So why are they 23rd? And shouldn't they be in the top 10 then? If
I
you go
agree.
put Cincinnati in the top 10,
I
how are they
agree.
different than Cincinnati?
I agree.
Well, based off what you just said there, I totally agree. Now the only thing is, didn't Cincinnati have a good year last year?
Yeah, but this.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They did.
I was going to say maybe this committee's like, well, Cincinnati's historically better, but why does that matter?
Yeah.
Saying that like they came into the season ranked higher in the first polls, which explains, I guess, why.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Why they've stuck higher, but that explains the Cincinnati thing. Why I guess they're not ranked like in the 20s. But like you said, based off this year, yeah, Texas San Antonio. I think, of course, let me preface this. I haven't been on this podcast a lot. I don't watch a ton of the college football, but I think San Antonio and Cincinnati, those teams are kind of comparable. Maybe Cincinnati's a little better, but they're both not Power 5 teams, and they're both historically kind of obscure in college football.
Yeah, they're comparable. Maybe they're not like maybe Texas San Antonio shouldn't be like 6th right below Cincinnati, but they shouldn't be 23rd. I don't think.
Right.
But to Josh's point too, maybe let's say San Antonio finishes in the top 25 this season. Maybe next year, if they do the same thing, they will be in the top 10 or 5 because that would be the situation like Cincinnati.
Could be. Yeah.
But
that's why I think that, and maybe you guys have talked about this before, maybe not, and then won't do this for height purposes. But you shouldn't even have polls or rankings until the first playoff polls.
Right.
Because Cincinnati got the advantage, obviously, from coming off a good year last year. Maybe they started ranked like 13th or 12th or whatever it was.
Right.
And then they're just going to keep being ahead of teams that are also undefeated and started behind them. You know?
Right.
I agree.
Right.
That's we brought that up before. I think that should be the case because you're right. They shouldn't preseason rank anybody. They shouldn't rank him at all until last week when they came out in the first college football.
Or at least 3 or 4 weeks into the season. I mean, something where you can start telling a little bit about these teams, because as you said, Joseph hit it on the head. You know, if a team comes in ranked 7th, all they got to do is keep winning, and they're going to move up the polls.
But then, like Joseph alluded to, like you said before, then week 2 they can't say it's number 1 Alabama's playing number 5 Ohio State.
Right. That's right.
It's almost impossible to do this, but you really need to just erase all history. Like coming into the season, like forget about Alabama, like who they are historically. Like just after the first 8 weeks, we think the best team or you know what I mean? It's like every year Alabama's gonna be in the top 5 based on look at the recruiting class, what they did last year, blah blah blah. Just because they're Alabama, you got to take that all the way and start from scratch. It's hard to do, but that's what they need to do sometimes.
Yeah,
I agree.
And I think I agree with that too. And I think if Alabama's as good as they live up to that every year, then there shouldn't be a problem for them.